Talk shoes. Recorded live.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to rebroadcast the last program because people said this thing got cut off and the recording went silent on it, and it's not showing up as being recorded, even though I did record it. We're going to try to replay Eric John's statement about the Trading with the Enemy Act and everything that he brought in for about an hour. So hold on a minute.
If the government of the United States were at war with the church, we would say tomorrow, quote, to hell with the government of the United States. And if the church and all the governments of the world were at war, we would say, to hell with all the governments of the world. Why is it the Pope has such tremendous power? Why, the Pope is the ruler of the world. All the emperors, all the kings, all the princes, all the presidents of the world are as these altar boys of mine, unquote. And now we understand why Ronald Reagan, in 1984, formally acknowledged the sovereign state of Vatican City, aided and consented to by the Senate of this country. Because now the Pope is absolutely the king of this country, ruling through his de facto military government ruled by the conqueror, the President of the United States, since March 9th, 1933.
Okay, March 9th, 1933. What's the significance of that date?
On March 9th, 1933, well, I'll go back to the 4th. I'll go back to the Great Depression. Great Depression hits in 1929. Everything crashes. Of course, the Great Depression was caused by three Irish Roman Catholic short sellers. The first and foremost being Joe Kennedy. For this, Joe Kennedy is going to be made a Knight of Malta. And also John J. Raskoff's in on this too, because Raskoff has encouraged all the farmers to invest on Wall Street, invest on the stock exchange, so we can crash it and steal all the funds of the farmers, which for the most part are white Protestant farmers and Baptists. So now we're going to have the Great Depression. It's going to be a huge confiscation of wealth. In 1929, the market falls in October. In February of 29, the Pope has given back his temporal power in the Lateran Treaty in Italy. And one of the things he's given is reparations, quote unquote, for 50 years or so, nearly 60 years of losing his temporal power from 1870 to 1929. Those reparations were approximately $90 million in gold. So what happens is, this huge fortune that the Italian people had to pay off to the Pope was then used to buy many of the businesses on the stock market when they crashed in 29 for pennies on the dollar. So now they're buying up the stock market, and they have caused a crash, and the people are desperate, and the depth of the crash is in 1932, when they then have FDR put into office, who's a 32nd degree Freemason, apostate Episcopalian, and having his political career put together by that Knight of Columbus, Al Smith, aided and abetted by that Knight of Malta, Nicholas Brady, who financed a Jesuit novitiate just 10 miles away from me here in Pennsylvania. So they put FDR in office. That has arranged the mobs involved in it, because Lucky Luciano is the personal friend of John J. Raskoff. John J. Raskoff was one of the heads of DuPont and another big company. He was the head, and he was also one of the chairmen of the Democratic Party. So John J. Raskoff is a personal friend of Lucky Luciano. So Lucky Luciano gives the order to all his mafia men that are controlling labor to have their people vote for FDR. So FDR is put in office by the Pope of Rome. On March 4th, when he takes his inauguration, there are no less than 6 Knights of Columbus in the background. You can watch this on a video. Just Google for the March 4th presidential inauguration of FDR, and you can see their hats moving around. They're 4th degree men with their 4th degree hats on, the chapeau as they call them. And so as FDR he begins his inauguration, what he says is, he says, this is a day of national consecration. Consecration is a religious term. You look it up in Blacksmith, you look it up in any law dictionary, it will tell you it is a religious term that's used by an archbishop or a bishop to consecrate a church or consecrate a land. It's a Roman title. What FDR told us there is he was going to consecrate the entire country, all the labor, all the land, and all the businesses, set it apart for the use of the Pope. On March 6th. And then he ends by saying, and in making this dedication, a dedication is the same thing. A dedication is the conqueror, having conquered a nation, then dedicating all the property that he has taken for public use. This is the beginning of public policy that took our gold from us. That suspended all gold payments and contracts of H.R. 192 and then Public Law 7310. They did this to us. They took it all. So on March 6th, FDR now, on March 6th, puts forth Proclamation 2039. In this Proclamation 2039, he declares a state of national emergency, premised and based upon Section 5B of an act of October 6, 1917. He never tells you what that act is. That act is the Trading with the Enemy Act. So on the basis of the Trading with the Enemy Act, which was supposed to be sheerly a World War I statute that was never repealed, that was amended 14 times from 1918 to 1913, it was kept in place so that it could be used as a basis for this presidential proclamation to put this country under military government. On March 6th, with all those Knights of Columbus waving their hats behind FDR, telling all the Roman Catholics in the foreground there, yeah, we're behind this Protestant Freemason. And I see at least two priests in that picture. One has an obvious Beretta on. So when he does this, on March 6th, he declares a state of national emergency. Section 5B of the Trading with the Enemy Act is amended so as to eliminate all transactions within the United States. So therefore, the Trading with the Enemy Act is going to be applied to all transactions, not only outside the United States concerning enemies, but also within the United States. And in doing this, he seized all the banks. He made every private American citizen, he made him a public citizen by seizing them, and he seized all the labor, all the land, and all the businesses by doing this. He made every American an enemy under Trading with the Enemy Act. And that's why every time you go to court, you see a martial flag. Every time you go through the airport, you see a martial flag trimmed in gold fringe or gold cord and tassels. Every time you go to a public school, you see a martial flag. Every time you go to most hotels, you have a martial flag. We've been under emergency war powers since March 9th, 1933. So what happens is, March 6th takes place, he seizes everything, and that means he also is going to seize every congressman and every senator, because they're now going to be public U.S. citizens, because it's assumed they all have birth certificates where they're registered on property on a state level. And the conqueror seizes all property on a state level, all registered property on a state level. So now they're the property of the conqueror. All the congressmen are his property. The Supreme Court are his property. When these congressmen get together on March 9th, they're saying, we have a tremendous emergency here, and we need to pass this act, this Emergency Banking Relief Act, based upon what? Section 5B of an act of October 6th, 1917, Trading with the Enemy Act. So now the Emergency Banking Relief Act is going to find its basis in the Trading with the Enemy Act, just like Proclamation 2039. And so now, this very same day, when the Congress passes this act, they never read it. It wasn't even in written form. And so now that they pass this act and they approve and confirm everything the president does from March 4th and thereafter, everything, including Executive Order 6102 that FDR is going to cut on April 5th. Of 1933, and gives all the people in the United States till May 1st to turn in all their gold, because what does he premise that executive order on? An act of October 6th, 1917. So they take all of our gold. They say it's against public policy to have gold in contracts. They take it all. They took all our gold. It's a huge, massive grand theft. They take all the labor. From then on, you're going to have labor, Department of Labor, because labor belongs to the conqueror. And then, about the same time, they're going to pass the 20th Amendment. And the 20th Amendment will be the new date for the inauguration of the conqueror. No more on March 4th for the President of the Republic. He's now the conqueror is inaugurated on January 20th. And FDR was the last president ever to be inaugurated on March 4th in his first term. Every term thereafter and every president thereafter is inaugurated on January 20th. They're the conquerors, no matter if they're Republican or Democrat. So on March 9th, he then puts forward Proclamation 2040. And 2040 just restates Proclamation 2039 because now it's been legitimatized by the Emergency Banking Relief Act based upon the Trading with the Enemy Act. So from March 9th, 1933, the Senate told us in 1973 that we've been under a state of a temporary emergency for 40 years. 40 years. And it has never been repealed. And so what we have now is we have the Jesuits with their military conqueror, the President of the United States, ruling as a conqueror, in complete and total control of all the finance and the war machine of this country, because all that matters in this empire is commerce and war. And they use all the commerce and the war of this country to wage war on other nations that the Pope has decided, to subjugate to his temporal power. That's all it is, from World War II onward. So when I found this out, that this was done to me, I took my Air Force uniform and I threw it in the trash because I was a sucker for 5 years. So this is what they've done. They've taken over the country. They've ousted the de jure government that arose from the Constitution and have replaced it with this military, de facto, statutory-based military government. And all this was set forth in perfect design in Berkheimer's Military Government and Martial Law, first printed in 1898. So the Jesuits have taken it all. They own all the money. They own the banks. They took all the gold. They own all the labor. And they do it in a very interesting way. They put a birth certificate on the pool, which is nothing more than a Roman Catholic baptismal certificate. A baptismal certificate creates a citizenship of the sovereign state of Vatican City. Every Roman Catholic has dual citizenship. He's a citizen of the United States, and he's a citizen of the sovereign state of Vatican City. Well, the Jesuits just took that principle of creating citizenship with a baptismal certificate, because it's signed, sealed, and delivered to a third party. They're all stored. The originals are stored in the Vatican. And they did the same thing with us. They put on the birth certificate on us. It's stored on a state level. And the moment FDR seized all registered property, he seized all the registered public U.S. citizens with their sureties, their private citizens. And now he rules us as a conquered people. We are enemies and belligerents living in the states, and the states are considered to be conquered territories. Every American is a public U.S. citizen, which I call a Roman. We're living under Roman government because we have this Roman statutory de facto citizenship put upon us by the Jesuits using their high-level Scottish Rite Freemasons in control of every capital, every state capital in this country.
Is this why we see such pushback to the sovereign citizen movement when people go to court and try to reclaim their private citizenship, their sovereignty? Is this why we see them labeled as enemies and is a movement that is being squashed out?
Well, it is really, they are enemies. They're doing it all wrong. They need to take my course. Because I teach, what they're saying is you need to be, I'm a sovereign. You're not a sovereign. The only sovereign in the world are kings and queens. The Pope's a sovereign. That witch, Elizabeth II, she's a sovereign. Queen Beatrix, who gave her now her throne over to her son, she was a sovereign. Now her son's a sovereign. We want to go back to becoming a private citizen under Section 1 of the 14th Amendment. So these people call themselves sovereigns. They're anarchists, and they ought to be treated as such, because they're not going back to true de jure 14th Amendment citizenship, as I teach in my class, because the 14th Amendment broadened and enlarged the old federal citizenship to make it national. It did not create new citizenship, so it's still de jure. And when you become a private citizen, now you have the protection of the Constitution, particularly to a civilian due process of law on a state level with the 14th Amendment, and civilian due process on a federal level with the 5th Amendment. It's all about status and process. They cannot give you a martial process if you are, in fact, a private citizen under Section 1 of the 14th Amendment. And that's all they have here today, martial process. So, yes, the sovereign movement is wrong. You can only be, to be a freeman, you have to be a private citizen. To be sui juris, you have to be a private citizen. And you can't be any of that if you're a public citizen, because if you're a public citizen, you are owned. You're nothing but an enemy or belligerent living on occupied territory. The conqueror and his agents, called judges, treat you like that. They treat all the property of the conqueror with belligerency. They're very belligerent, and they're going to tell you the way it is because they're agents for the conqueror, and the whole purpose of the courts is to secure the victory for the conqueror. So this was all done to us by the Pope of Rome, by his Jesuits who run Georgetown University, Fordham University, Loyola in Chicago, Loyola in New Orleans, Loyola Marymount in Baltimore, all there are 28 major universities in this country. 1 out of every 10 lawyers is trained by Jesuits in this country. And they put upon us what I call, it's huge. It's huge. 1 out of 10. Yep. And then, of course, you have the Jesuits training all their intelligence guys there. You got George J. Tenet, Jesuit trained. You got Leon Panetta, Jesuit trained. You got Gates, Jesuit trained. All the major guys. Peter Pace is Jesuit trained. All the guys in positions of power, militarily and intelligence community, have some connection, some way, either through the universities or the CFR to the Jesuit order. All of them.
So, in essence, what you've just described here is the history of an internal takeover, of a takeover of the United States, and and their tactics, from what you just described, miseducation. You're talking about perversions, propaganda, political and judicial affectations, numerous things, and agencies that they control. I mean, they control everything. It's the basis of the power structure here in the United States, and we've got, and I know we're up against a break, Joe, but the looking at this and looking at our guest tonight, by the way, folks, is Eric John Phelps, VaticanAssassins.org, looking at this Vatican Jesuit Masonic network. Operations. We often talk about the City of London. Heard us talk about that. And the base of operation there is Vatican City, Rome, and Italy, and of course our capital, the District of Columbia, which, and one of the shows I did earlier, I had mentioned about the District of Columbia formerly called Rome. But that's what
Justin Fulton called it in his great book. He called it Washington in the Lap of Rome. Called Rome in the Potomac.
Yeah, and in reading some of the books predating the founding of America, it talks about, it frequently references the spirit of Rome, which says it was looking for a home, and how they have found it through their new country, which they hope to establish through America, and that they did. Brother Eric, we're going to take the top of the hour break right now. It'll be just a few minutes, a quick word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back after these short messages, folks. You're listening to the Hagman and Hagman Report on this Wednesday, July 9th, 2014. Eric John Phelps is our guest. His book, Vatican Assassins. Order that book online on CD. If you want to get it in print, it's kind of expensive, as it's over 1,800 pages, 700 plus graphics and pictures, documents. It is worth it. Get it on the computer, get it in a hard copy, however you can do it, but go ahead and grab it. Here's News in 2 Minutes by Hagman and Hagman Report on this Wednesday, July 9th, 2014, with a very special guest, Eric Phelps. Mr. Phelps, I'm going to open this hour with a question from a listener, Betty. She asks that what Bible is the
may I interrupt just for 1 second to clarify something? You had the advertisement of Jack Nicholson and Tom Cruise on there with that movie, A Few Good Men, right?
Yeah, that was our opening, yes.
Both Jack Nicholson and Tom Cruise are Knights of Malta.
Interesting.
Now, okay, just to be clear now, what's the significance? Knights of Malta, I don't want to sound naive here, but in the context of Hollywood, what's the significance there? What is their influence?
They run Hollywood. There are certain notable Masonic Jews, but the Knights of Malta run Hollywood as told what to do by the Jesuits. You have former, very influential Knights like Frank Capra. He was a Knight of Malta. You have certain actors that are Knights today, like Al Pacino. like what's his name? Bishop. You have
Bishop Sheen. He's talking about Hollywood. He's talking about Hollywood.
I'm talking about Hollywood. Yeah. Hollywood, yeah. Knight of Malta. You got Anthony Quinn, the old Anthony Quinn actor. You got Anthony Hopkins. He's a Knight of Malta. You got Robert De Niro. He's a Knight of Malta. Al Pacino. You have all these different Knights of Malta that are Hollywood actors. Yeah.
Now, is a person, for example, let's say Jack Nicholson, does he get tapped on the shoulder and say, hey, we want to induct you into our organization, the Knights of Malta, or how does that work?
That's exactly how it works. You have to be invited.
Okay.
He's another Knight of Malta.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he sued me publicly for making it quite public. He didn't succeed, thank God, but he's a Knight of Malta, busy serving the Pope of Rome.
Okay. And that's the oath they take, then, it's my understanding, as a Knight of Malta.
That's right.
Which you have.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter which branch, be it the Orthodox branch, the Protestant branch, no matter what branch it is, all the members of the Order of St. John of Jerusalem all go back to Blessed Gerard. Blessed Gerard is considered the founder of the Knights of Malta in 1048, and the first crusading order to take Jerusalem away from the Muslims. These Knights of Malta all dovetail in being controlled by the Pope of Rome, regardless of their title. So you always have to be looking and say, who's a knight here, who's a knight there? And that will show you where the power structure is.
Interesting how you pull back the covers of this. Okay, good.
That's correct. That's exactly right.
And before you ask your question, I'm sorry, I'm just going to insert this here because when we're talking about the Jesuits and the Knights of Malta, by the way, would you consider them the enforcement arm of the Jesuits, or how would you describe them?
They're one of the enforcement arms. Luther Murdoch's a Knight of Malta. He's also a Knight of the Equestrian Order, which is even higher than the Knights of Malta. Yes, they're enforcement. They're in law. Edward Bennett Williams, the former mayor, former huge attorney in Washington, D.C. OBJ wanted to make him mayor of Washington, D.C. He refused, but Edward Bennett Williams was the owner of the Washington Redskins and the Baltimore Orioles. There's a book you want to read called The Man to See. The Man to See. It's about the life of Edward Bennett Williams. Huge man of power in Washington during the Kennedy assassination and under LBJ. But you want to make all these connections with the Knights of Malta, because the Knights of Malta were submitted by the Jesuits to their order when the Knights were driven out of Malta, when Napoleon invaded in 1798, kicked out the Knights, drove the Grand Master into Russia, and they went into a secret deal with the Jesuit general in Russia at the time. And from that time forward, the Knights of Malta have always been the most obedient servants of the Jesuits and the Roman papacy that they will control.
Very interesting. Okay. And when Mr. Felsen, when we talk about the Illuminati, for example, and the different families, Rockefellers, Rothschilds, and the various bloodlines, are we talking, is the Jesuits, is the organization itself, the Jesuit organization, is that interchangeable with the Illuminati, or is that over the Illuminati, or within it, or incestuous within the Illuminati, or how does that work?
The Jesuits started the Illuminati. They're the creators of it. Because the Jesuits were suppressed by the Pope in 1773, so they had to go underground. They were kicked out of Bavaria, where they had their Ingolstadt College and Ingolstadt University now. One of the professors of canon law was Adam Weishaupt. Adam Weishaupt was no Jew. He was a German Roman Catholic professor of Roman canon law that taught the supremacy of the Pope in spiritual and temporal matters. So the Jesuits started the Bavarian Illuminati, and I have, in my PowerPoint, I show that there was not one Jew that was a member of the Illuminati when it was founded, according to Professor Robinson in his great work written in 1798 concerning this conspiracy that he wrote about. I have a slide in my PowerPoints, but there was not one Jew who was in the Bavarian Illuminati at the time. So they started the Illuminati for the purpose of inciting the French Revolution to overthrow the King of France, because the King of France had kicked the Jesuits out of France, as well as the King of Portugal and the King of Spain, and then to launch a huge crusade, a huge war war in Europe using Napoleon Bonaparte. They're for the destroy the wonderful Protestant Reformation. They're going to destroy the Protestant Dutch Republic in 1795 with Napoleon. They're going to destroy the Republic of Venice, the beautiful Republic of Venice that was in sympathy with the Reformation. They're going to destroy that in 1797 with Napoleon. They're going to do everything they can to set back the Reformation while restoring the Pope's temporal power and killing heretics and liberals pursuant to the Council of Trent. So that's the Bavarian Illuminati. The Illuminati, the Rothschilds were nothing more than the keepers of the Vatican treasury during the 18th century for a while. Now the Rothschilds are as nothing compared to the financial power of the Aldobrandinis, of the Colonnas, of the Farneses, of the several of the major families I have listed on my website, the 10 most powerful families. They're all Italian, Roman Catholic, Grey Jesuits, and they control the giga-trillions. So the Rothschilds and Rockefellers are all subject to the Jesuits and other papal knights. They are not the power that the Patriot movement tells you about. That's all a elusive war to get you off trying to blame the Jews, when in fact it's the papacy and the Jesuits that are the problem.
Interesting, and that's a big problem I see, is this misdirection and really a miseducation, educational problem of the alternative media, and especially they'll grab onto this, they'll focus on this Jewish cabal, this really, and we've done a lot of research, of course, and that's nothing more than, to me, anti-Semitic red herring. Away from the real power structure. Okay, good. All right.
That's always what they do. Pope Clement Innocent III, Pope Innocent III was a master in redirection and blaming the Jews for the problems of Europe. And it's the same modus operandi they do today. That's why they put a Jew at the head of the Federal Reserve Bank. That's why they put a Jew at the head of the Treasury. So when everything crashes, they can blame the Jews. When the judges Georgetown and Fordham run everything.
Fall guy. Okay. It makes perfect sense. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I got the sense of this when I was going through your book and reading it. Folks, I'm going to tell you something. If you want an education, this encyclopedia of the real structure, power structure, VaticanAssassins.org. I'm a proponent of this. I mean, folks, I own a copy of this, a digital copy of Vatican Assassins, and I would urge our listeners, if you want to really get into it, go to VaticanAssassins.org and click on the download button. It's inexpensive for the amount of information you get. This will keep you busy for the rest of the summer, I believe. Joe, you had I interrupted you with a question.
We have a question from Betty, and this is getting back to the basics. They ask what Bible is the true Word of God and Jesus Christ, which has not been manipulated? Thank you, and God bless, Betty.
Okay. Well, Betty, the Bible that you want to read if you're an English-speaking person is the AB 1611 Reformation King James Bible. That's it. It's the epitome of the English Bibles. It's superior, vastly superior to the Geneva Bible. The Geneva Bible has some nice notes in it, and I recommend it, but the translation is far superior to the Geneva Bible. They both use essentially the same Greek text. The Greek text of the AB 1611 was the 5th edition of Theodore Beza. But it's the Reformation text that we came out of Constantinople when the Muslims took Constantinople. The Byzantine text was driven west into Europe. Erasmus is the first to put it out. Luther uses the Erasmus text for his Luther Bible, and ultimately in the AB 1611, when the 47 learned and godly men did their translating, they used the Ben Chaim Hebrew text, not Biblica Hebraica, and they used the Byzantine text, also called the Textus Receptus, the majority text, the received text, which was Theodore Beza's 5th edition, which is a combination of Stevens and Beza's text. So it's the Word of God in English. There are places that need clarification, but it's the place that God, I don't mean correction, I mean clarification. But it's the book God has blessed for the last 400 years. It's been taken to the ends of the earth. Over 60 or 70 translations have been made for that text. When the Reformation was prospering and the 19th century was going great, and it was the age of the Philadelphia Church, the AB 1611 Bible was everywhere. And the Jesuits knew if they were to overthrow the British Empire, they had to overthrow the AB 1611 overthrow the American Republic and bring that into an empire, they had to overthrow the AB 1611 King James Bible.
Interesting. Thank you for that answer, and thanks for entertaining that question. When we talk about, we're talking about globalism here, and we're seeing things happen all around us at breakneck speed, in my view. And of course, during the last 200 years, and in particular the last 100 years, we've seen, at least based on what I've read from your work, we've seen the power of this Vatican Masonic network overtly being increased tremendously through various social, technological policies, industrialization, political and religious globalization. And the major goals, as I understand it, again, referencing your work, is globalization and collectivism of ideologies, centralization of, centralized socialism, for example, communism, fascism, all of this. And we're seeing this and by way of occultism and using, and this is something, folks, that, and I'm going to be quiet and let Mr. Phelps continue, but one thing that really fascinated me, again, citing Mr. Phelps' voluminous work, is the how we talk about, and Tom Horner, our guests, talk about, for example, the obelisks in Washington, Rome, and other locations, and their symbology in the meta, and of course how a lot of Western rituals and festivals have been really laden with occult meanings, many of which strongly influenced by ancient Rome and Roman Catholic Vatican culture. So I'm going to let you go ahead and continue. We're going to let you continue on with your presentation. Take us where you want to take us. We say, at this point.
Okay. Let me think. Okay. I'll take you where the Jesuits have their power structure. Their headquarters is in what's called Borgo Santo Spirito, number 5 in Rome. It's just outside Vatican walls. Their headquarters is a military headquarters. It's guarded by missiles, and it's guarded by an army, a small army of highly armed, highly trained Knights of the Equestrian Order. So it is a military power that is really overseeing what's going on in the Vatican. They, in turn, they have their great mother church, quote unquote, the Jesu, G-E-S-U, in a little square called the Piazza del Gesù in Rome, the Plaza of Jesus in Rome. In that square is not only the Church of Jesu, which is the heart of Jesuitism there in Rome as far as their church is concerned, but in that same plaza we have the international headquarters for Scottish Rite Freemasonry, the international headquarters. So the Jesuits run all high-level Scottish Rite Freemasonry, and F. Tupper Saucy was right, even though he was a Jesuit coadjutor working for him. He was right when he said the G in the center of the compass in the square stands for Jesu, G-E-S-U, of the Jesuits. So they run Scottish Rite Freemasonry. Rome is the center city for all religious, political power. Many of the American senators have homes, have nearly live in Rome. Ron Paul's been to Rome 50 times. Ron Paul, some of his dearest friends are Roman Catholic priests. Ron Paul's a traitor. He has no intention of ever being a true patriotic American and nationalist. So what we have is they run it all. And their center city in Rome is a great haven for the visitors, men of power in this country. I got a picture of Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich, another papal knight, who was a Baptist and turned Catholic because he married his wife. She's a Roman Catholic. Sons are trained by Jesuits. I got Newt Gingrich sitting next to Benny Hinn in the Vatican. They're all working together for the Pope. Millionaires. So their center of power is there. When Pope John Paul II died, there were 150 heads of state in Vatican City paying respects, quote unquote, to the Pope. What for? Because he was their master. He was their Caesar. Doesn't matter what religion they were either. That's the kind of power they have. They control the intelligence community. They can eliminate any head of state on an order of the Jesuit general within 48 hours.
Who is the Jesuit general? Is the Pope, the Black Pope, the Jesuit Pope, the Black Pope?
Yes, he's a Black Pope. The present Jesuit general is Adolfo Nicolas. He's a Basque from Spain. He's highly trained in the martial arts. He speaks perfect Japanese without an accent. He was a provincial in the Far East, and I maintain that the reason why the former general resigned after 25 years, it was Peter Hans Kolbenbach. He was a provincial in the Middle East. He was the provincial over Beirut, Damascus, and Cairo. And I maintain the reason why they have, it's almost a dual Jesuit generalship, is because when they foment this huge war, it's going to be huge in the Far East, and that's Adolfo Nicolas's expertise. It's going to be huge in the Middle East, which is Peter Hans Kolbenbach's expertise. So they will be able to orchestrate the wars, orchestrate the armies, orchestrate the generals to do the killing that they want to take place. It'll be all under their control.
So this is, of late, is really what the entire world is witnessing, or what's happening before our eyes. We may not be seeing it, but it's taking place, is the movement of the grand chess pieces within the powers of the Jesuit order. Is that a fair statement?
That's correct. That's a very fair statement. Remember, the Jesuits run the government of Russia. They run through the FSB and SPR. They run the government of the United States through the CIA, FBI, NSA, Department of Homeland Security. They run the government of Israel through the Mossad, Shin Bet. They run the Arab countries through their various different intelligence communities. They all work together. All the heads of state work together. If you got a disobedient head of state, like Muammar Gaddafi, we're going to kill him. And we'll put somebody else at the head of that country. Somebody wants to build their country and become a nationalist and want to bring wealth into your country, we're going to kill them. We can't have any country prospering for the benefit of their people. We're going to kill the Serbs, too, because you see the Orthodox Serbs, they're really an enemy. They're an absolute enemy of the Roman papacy. So we're going to use trained Bill Clinton to bomb the Orthodox Serbs for 77 days. And it goes on and on and on. Now they're fomenting a war in Ukraine, and what do they want? They're creating the alignment between Russia and China to be the enemies of the West. And the Pentagon, at this very moment, is planning a two-front war with China and Russia in the East and the Middle East in the West. They're planning it. They know they're not going to win because it'll ultimately bring down the country. But with traitors like Leon Panetta, that Knight of Malta, from the Jesuit Santa Clara University in California, with other traitors like George J. Tenet, who's another Knight of Malta, Mr. Slam Dunk George J. Tenet. He's the one behind causing the war in Afghanistan. And then you got L. Paul Bremer. L. Paul Bremer III is not only CFR, but he's also another Knight of Malta and Jesuit brother. He's the one that creates the whole opposition in Iraq. He creates the insurgency in Iraq when he does away with the Iraqi Guard. Your listeners must watch the tremendous video, No End in Sight. And it's a complete indictment of L. Paul Bremer, of what he did there. L. Paul Bremer is a Knight of Malta. George W. Bush, the spokesman, will give the Presidential Medal of Freedom to L. Paul Bremer, George J. Tenet, and the invader of Afghanistan, Tommy Franks. And they invaded Afghanistan, by the way, we cannot forget this. They invaded Afghanistan on October 7th, 2001. October 7th is a very important day for the Roman papacy because it was on October 7th, 1591, I believe, that the Battle of Lepanto raged, and the Knights of Malta with their ships defeated the Ottoman Turks and thereby opened up Jerusalem to Europe. The Battle of Lepanto is considered to be the second most important naval sea battle, second only to the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. And so the Battle of Lepanto was fought on October 7th. Well, I will start the invasion of Afghanistan on October 7th.
Dates, numbers, they all mean things, don't they?
Absolutely. I'll give you another one. March 9th, 1933. Well, March is the third month. 9 is 9, so that's 3 and 9 is 12. You got 33, you add 3 and 3 for 33. So you got 12, you got 15 with another 3, then you got 18. 18 divided by 3 is 666, 3 sixes. were waiting for March 9th for a long time. And I have fellow researchers that said to me, when they passed the Emergency Banking Relief Act on March 9th, 1933, there was a hullabaloo in the House. All this noise and yelling and partying. Finally, the Speaker of the House said, "You need to quiet down up there. We're going to have to clear the gallery." The Jesuits had a party on March 9th, 1933, because that's when they took this place for the Pope. And they did it on their occult numbering system that they love to use, which is Kabbalah.
And that's still in use today.
Absolutely. They're the masters of Kabbalah. Mm-hmm.
And by Kabbalah, are you talking about the Madonna Kabbalah? You know, the infamous...
That's correct. Same thing. Roman Catholic Madonna. That's right.
Interesting.
The Virgin.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Preoccupation with the Virgin. You have the same preoccupation with a virgin, with a woman, with the Borg of Star Trek. The Borg of Star Trek are half human, half machine. They're dressed in black. And the Borg is the Jesuit order because it's named after Borgo Santo Spirito, Latin for the village of the Holy Spirit. That's the headquarters for the Jesuits in Rome. So naturally, Gene Roddenberry would name his Jesuits the Borg. And the head of the Borg would be a woman. And they would travel in a black box, a black block. Just like the Masonic Freemasons, with every Masson is a black ashlar stone. There's a cemetery of all these Jesuits over here, novitiate here in Warnersville, and they put a new display up, and every Jesuit is portrayed as a black block on the wall with no name. It's just a huge phalanx of a military arm with no name, no faces, just working to the same end for the Jesuit general.
Wow. Okay. This is absolutely incredible information. Folks, you're listening to Eric John Phelps, his website, VaticanAssassins.org. That's VaticanAssassins.org. Be prepared to spend some time there. What a fantastic resource. And, of course, you can hear, as you hear right now, I feel we bring the best guests with the best information to you. And this is certainly a flagship example of that, Mr. Phelps. That is his website and his book, Vatican Assassins, a marvelous resource of information. So go ahead.
Go ahead.
Let me give you another example of the power of these secret societies all working together. There's probably no greater example than the Bush family. Prescott Bush Sr. was a bonesman. And I maintain a Knight of Malta, too, because he was working with Fritz Thyssen in the building of the German army. Fritz Thyssen was a very powerful Knight of Malta in Europe, one of the richest men in Europe. You have Prescott Bush Sr., we've reviewed him. Prescott Bush has a son, Prescott Jr. He's a Knight of Malta. He's the brother of George Herbert Walker Bush, bonesman. George Herbert Walker Bush has a son, George W. He's a bonesman. He has another son, Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush is a fourth-degree Knights of Columbus, who, with my contacts that I have in Miami, says that he runs the entire drug trade in Miami. So the Knights of Columbus, Skull and Bonesman, Knights of Malta, all in the same family, all working together.
Wow. Folks, think about that. And listeners, please, it's not like I have to really urge you, but really contemplate the significance of what Mr. Phelps is saying here and the significance of these secret societies that are really calling the shots. It's really theater. Our reality is theater, and what Mr. Phelps is explaining is really the power structure behind the theater.
Yeah.
Pulling the strings.
Yeah.
Wow.
Let me give you another example. You got John Boehner, who's supposedly an enemy of Barry Davis Obama. His real name is Barry Davis. His father was Frank Marshall Davis, a notable communist in Chicago. So I call him Barry Davis Obama. Barry Davis Obama was trained by Jesuits in Chicago. The foremost Jesuit that was his mentor was Greg Galuzzo of the Gamaliel Foundation. Of course, you got to make it look Jewish now, so we're going to name it after Jew, Gamaliel. When a Jesuit founded it, named Greg Galuzzo. Greg Ozer will be the tutor of Barry Davis Obama. Another one of his tutors will be Zbigniew Brzezinski. Zbigniew Brzezinski is a Polish Knight of Malta, beloved of the Jesuits at Georgetown and other Jesuit universities in this country. He is a true papal knight and man of power. Zbigniew Brzezinski was one of the founders and creators of Al-Qaeda. He was a personal friend of bin Laden before he died shortly after 9/11. So you have that connection. Now you have Barry Davis Obama. He's controlled by the Jesuits, and his real master, the real president, is that white devil, Joe Biden. He has 2 honorary degrees from the Jesuits, one from St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, the other from Scranton University here in Pennsylvania, both in Pennsylvania, to the disgrace of my state. He's the real master. He's the one that's right at the right hand of Obama whenever he signs any law into effect. He's a Roman Catholic Jesuit. Now you have Obama, you have Biden, and now you have John Boehner. John Boehner is supposedly the enemy of Obama, and he's going to sue Obama. That's all smoke and mirrors. Oh, John Boehner is a 4th-degree Knight of Columbus. John Boehner is the one responsible for getting a Jesuit, I believe it's Patrick Conway, as the chaplain of the House of Representatives. So they control both sides. You got Jesuits like Lawrence O'Donnell with MSNBC, and you got Jesuits like Chris Matthews with MSNBC, who was the what do you call him? The journeyman, the apprentice for Patrick Moynihan of New York. Patrick Moynihan was a great professor and loved by the Jesuits of Ford, and Patrick Moynihan was involved in the Kennedy assassination cover-up. So Chris Matthews knows this. He was his right-hand man. And now Chris Matthews was put at the head of MSNBC. He was a good socialist, good communist, like all most Roman Catholics are socialist communists. They hate the idea of free enterprise, and they love monopolies for the rich. And so you got Chris Matthews, you got Lawrence O'Donnell there, and then that's on one extreme, the left, quote unquote, and then on the right, what do you have? You have Roman Catholic Sean Hannity on Fox News. You got Roman Catholic Bill O'Reilly on Fox News, looking out for you. Yeah, right. Rupert Murdoch, the head of it all, Knight of the Equestrian Order, Knight of Malta, Knight of St. Gregory. They control both factions, and neither faction will ever raise up a president that will terminate Proclamation 2040. Never. That would be their death sentence. And I maintain Kennedy was going to do that because he said, we don't have a Pax Americana. What's that? It's an empire, American peace, world peace. How do you do that? You got to have a conqueror. You got to have a Caesar in place. He was saying there's probably not going to be a Caesar anymore because he was probably going to terminate Proclamation 2040. And that's when they terminated him in Dallas at 12:30, November 22nd, 1963. So you have that issue. And then the other thing, you'll never have a Congress that's going to repeal the Emergency Banking Relief Act, 12 United States Code 95A. They'll never repeal it, because if they repeal that act and they repeal Proclamation 2040, that's the end of military government in this country, and they'll make very sure they're not going to do that. No Republican and no Democrat would ever raise their voice to call for such things. They know that would be a death sentence.
This is fascinating. You mentioned the Kennedy assassination. Of course, therein lies perhaps the biggest motive for the assassination. That is that,
yeah.
Because I read this in your book, but for the listeners, if you want to just get into the Kennedy assassination a bit for the listeners, and then folks, his book Vatican Assassins, Mr. Phelps does lay out some pretty interesting details with respect to that. But if you want to touch on that.
Sure,
again,
sure.
Just to drive that point home.
Sure. You can only understand the Kennedy assassination in light of Francis Cardinal Spellman. He was the most powerful churchman in this country at that time. Spellman was beloved of Pope Pius XII. Spellman was a Knight of Malta. He was the head of the American branch of Knights of Malta out of St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. Remember, St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York is right across the street from Rockefeller Center, filled with CIA boys, run also by the Knights of Malta. Remember, Alan Dulles was a Knight of Malta, Tennant was a Knight of Malta, Panetta was a Knight of Malta. I count at least 6 Knights of Malta that were heads of the CIA in the past. William Colby, who they killed because he became disobedient. So what Francis Cardinal Spellman was a man of power, the man of power in this country from St. Patrick's Cathedral. Well, Kennedy couldn't stand it. Kennedy would not allow Spellman to say Mass in the White House. Remember, Francis Cardinal Spellman, after World War II, is the most powerful man in this country. He's the controller of MacArthur. He's the controller of Eisenhower. He's the controller of Walter Beadle Smith, the first head of the CIA, an arch traitor. And Patton so couldn't stand Walter Beadle Smith that he refused to allow Walter Beadle Smith to be a pallbearer in his funeral, and instead Patton made sure that his black Sergeant Meeks, would be his pallbearer in place of Walter Beadle Smith. So what we have is all these men of power, and they're controlled by Francis Cardinal Spellman. Spellman is in control of the CIA. He's in control of the NSA. He's one of the first guys to be taken out by General Vandenberg after the Roswell crash of the anti-gravity craft that crashed back there, which is, of course, an American craft built in Pyrex from Corning out of New York. So he's overseeing all of this, and Kennedy is his enemy. Kennedy wants to do away with the Vietnam War. Kennedy called the Vietnam War was called back in the 1960s Spelly's War, Cardinal Spellman's War. Spellman visited the troops in 1965 and called them, get this, called them the soldiers of Christ. You can read all of this in The American Pope by John Cooney. The American Pope by John Cooney, written in 1988. He has the Al Smith dinner every year when he invites all the men of power in finance and military and politics. They're all there at the Al Smith dinner. All the big knights, all the big bankers, all of them are there. That's why both presidential candidates are there. That's why you got the Pope's court Jews there, like Chucky Schumer and all the other sinners, busy serving the Pope of Rome. Lap dogs for the Archbishop there to do whatever he tells them to do, like taking your guns and have a more socialist communism and more anti-white legislation to destroy the white people in this country, particularly the Protestants and Baptists, to drive us to desperation into right-wing fascism. All this is a design of the Roman papacy, and at the time Spellman is pushing it because he's also behind the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement was utter treason to the black people of this country. It was led by Roman Catholic, it was led by high-level Freemasons like A. Philip Randolph, who founded the Sleeping Car Porters. A. Philip Randolph was controlled by Jesuit John Lafarge. And I saw a book by a dear black lady on my website who tells the whole terrible story of the civil rights movement. Martin Lucifer King doing nothing but only getting the black people into commerce and into the military to fight for the purposes of the Pope. That's all he was about. So we have Spellman. He's behind us. Spellman is a member of the Urban League in New York. Spellman is overseeing the civil rights movement with these Masonic Jews, Stanley Levinson, that are advising Martin Luther King. Spellman is the head of the FBI through 33rd degree Freemason J. Edgar Hoover and Hoover's secret boss, who was Cartha DeLoach, who was a high-level Knight of Malta, and he was also the head of Division 5 at the time of the FBI Kennedy assassination. So you have Spellman running Henry Luce. Henry Luce was a Knight of Malta. He controlled Time magazine. He's the one that bought the Zapruder film for $150,000. Cardinal Spellman is a personal friend and overseer of Knight of Malta, Lee Iacocca. Lee Iacocca was the head of Dearborn Division of Ford Motor Company at the time of the Kennedy assassination in '63. And what does Iacocca do? He has his chief of security, Carl Renas, drive the limousine back to a Cincinnati Ford dealership to repair all the primary strikes. Lee Iacocca is a traitor. He's also involved in the Kennedy assassination, and he's never been confronted with it, except in my book. So you have Spellman running all these Knights of Malta. He runs Clay Shaw, the head of the trademark in New Orleans. He runs William F. Buckley of the firing line. He's a Knight of Malta. He runs John McCone, who's a Knight of Malta and head of CIA. He runs Claire Booth Luce, the Dame of Malta, who was an ambassador to Italy under the Eisenhower administration. Dwight Eisenhower was a Knight of Malta. He wrote the book Crusade in Europe, and that's all it was, a huge crusade for the Pope. He controls, he controls one of the heads of, he's going to be a former head of the CIA at the time, William Casey. William Casey's a Knight of Malta. James Angleton's a Knight of Malta. And they're all controlled by Francis Cardinal Spellman. So when Kennedy gets out of line, Spellman gives the word. And an order goes down for his assassination. And it's going to go through the Pentagon. What about the Pentagon? The Pentagon was built by a huge Philadelphia contracting business owned by a Knight of Malta named John McShane. John McShane. All of it's in the hands of the Pope. Kennedy says, I'm not going to obey Spellman. I'm going to get us out of Vietnam by 1965. Fletcher Prouty writes his great work, JFK, of which the movie is based upon largely, a lot of that. And Spellman says, no, you're not. You're not pulling all these troops out. We got a bunch of things to accomplish there, Nam. So, for that, and also Kennedy, he attacks the Pope's Federal Reserve Bank. He wants to take the Federal Reserve notes out of circulation. He wants to circulate nearly $6 billion worth of United States notes. And so what happens is he's assassinated. About 1 or 2 days after the assassination, LBJ reverses the executive order of Kennedy for all the United States notes to be circulated. LBJ is totally controlled by Spellman. Now, LBJ's best friend was a Roman Catholic priest, Winibald Snyder. LBJ's personal friend in Washington, Edward Bennett Williams, who became the head of the Knights of Malta in America for a time. Billy Graham. Billy Graham was the personal friend of LBJ and Edward Bennett Williams, and Billy Graham is a traitor. Another dirty, filthy traitor, a 33rd degree Freemason working for the Pope of Rome. And I hope and pray someday that somebody really comes out and exposes him for his hand in the Kennedy assassination. So you have all these knights involved, but they're all subject to Francis Cardinal Spellman. And right over here at the Jesuit Spiritual Center, there was a novitiate at the time. Francis Cardinal Spellman had a special room called Room Number 3. And there he would go meet with the Jesuits of power of the Maryland province and be told what he needs to do. Spellman, after the assassination of Kennedy, refused to stay in this country. He goes to Rome and performs a high mass in Rome because he's not sticking around here. And Joe Kennedy knows it. And many of the Roman Catholics know it, and the Kennedys no longer have anything to say to Francis Cardinal Spellman. So Francis Cardinal Spellman oversaw the entire assassination of John F. Kennedy and the cover-up, and the cover-up will continue with Terence Cardinal Cook, and it will continue because we have Frank Sturgis was one of the assassins in Dallas. He's going to make a 22-page confession to Terence Cardinal Cook and tell everything that happened in Dallas that day. And one of the things he tells in his 22-page confession that's suppressed in Terence Cook's archives there in St. Patrick's Cathedral is the fact that the man who killed Jefferson Davis, Officer Tippit, Jefferson Lee Tippit, I believe. He kills Officer Tippit. The man who killed Tippit in Dallas was G. Gordon Liddy, Roman Catholic faithful knight, so beloved by J. Edgar Hoover. She got all these sinners, all these traitors, all these murderers, all these liars running everything in this country, and the pulpits are dead silent. Not a peep from any one of them. John MacArthur, to you name it, none of them. In fact, Kenneth Copeland now is bringing his church back to the Pope of Rome, just like that James Robinson. Those traitors, those evangelical traitors. And what that means is a military dictatorship of martial law under a dictator that will have no restraints and limitations, as was Hitler in Germany, so shall we have here.
This is our future, is what you're telling me.
That's correct. If there is no great awakening, if God does not send a great awakening like he did send 3 times before in this country, then we will go down into the dust, the same dust that Germany went down in the Second 30 Years' War from 1914 to 1945. They will crush the Reformation out of this country, and they will kill every Jew in North America. They're all slated for death. The Department of Homeland Security is going to invade Canada. Canada will be merged with the U.S., and the roundups will take place just as the Jesuits used their SS under the Anschluss of 1938 to take in Austria into Germany, and then that will be a foundation for the roundups, the beginning of the roundups in Germany and Austria. And they're going to do that here, unless there's a great awakening and men start talking about it and doing something about it.
Amen to that.
Folks, I just want to say this. What you're hearing is really a great, very precise and a concise summary of what's in Mr. Phelps' book, Vatican Assassins. I'm going to tell you something. If you grab that book, download the book, 5 volumes, it'll give you the details. We're touching on the highlights. We could go, in not 3 hours, we can go probably for 3 weeks like this because it is so detailed. The research is so precise. The reason I'm just telling you this is because it's worth, the information is worth having. And one thing I was very impressed with, and then I'm going to necessarily appendices, but that's not the word I'm looking for. That's incorporated in this work. It's a marvelous piece of research, and I'm not here to sell the book, except I do recommend it. I'm explaining to you that this subject is so vast. And Mr. Phelps, I'm so, as you're talking, I could tell this is not something you're checking your notes on. This is something you've lived, and it's coming second nature to you. I'm just amazed by it. And I want to thank you for taking your time out. But before we go on, before I turn over to Joe, you mentioned something here. I've got to ask this question. Why? You mentioned about G. Gordon Liddy reportedly murdering Officer Tippett. What was the motive behind that?
Evidently, Tippett was involved in some shady things, drug deals, and whatever. He was not a very clean guy. But I'm not sure of all the details. But I discovered this through Jim Rothstein, who was a former New York Police Department detective. And he said it on a program that I was on with him, that he knew that Terrence Cardinal Cook had this 22-page confession of Frank Sturgis. Frank Sturgis also used to dress up like a Jesuit, too, that crazy assassin. And Sturgeon, in his confession, according to Jim Rothstein, said that Gordon Liddy did the shooting of Tippett. This is for why I'm sure there was other reasons. They were probably just eliminating evidence. Maybe Tippett knew something. Because remember, there's over 100 assassinations of witnesses. Remember Jim Keith's work, The Dead Witnesses? Over 120 dead witnesses after the Kennedy assassination, because the CIA and the FBI are just busy eliminating any kind of evidence that could be used in a trial. There's no evidence, there's no trial. So they eliminated them. They eliminated DeMorin-Schultz and others. DeMorin-Schultz was a night of Malta, too. Clay Shaw, they poisoned him. He didn't even have an autopsy. So they eliminate their own if they become a threat to the temporal power of the Pope.
Wow. And folks, we've had others on talking about, the death of, there's a very strange death of Mary Sherman, Dr. Mary Sherman down in Louisiana, I believe it was.
Yes.
New Orleans,
yes.
Yeah. And this is very convoluted, to say the least. But okay, so we've gone through the Kennedy assassination. Of course, Watergate, we know, is tightly connected with the Kennedy assassination. Nixon.
Oh, yes. Well, by the way, you mentioned Mary Sherman. I just want to mention something about her. The book your listeners need to get if they don't have it. It's called Dr. Mary's Monkey by Haslam. And a tremendous, fabulous work that he put together. God bless him for it. He has a picture of David Ferry in a cassock in a Jesuit novitiate. That is something nobody...
Yep. And we've interviewed him on this program.
He's a great guy. He did a wonderful service. Thank God for him, because he proves the connection of the Jesuits to David Ferry. David Ferry, CIA, and also Mafia. Total Jesuit connection. But he started to talk, so they got rid of him. Yeah.
Very interesting. We have a number of questions from listeners, and I guess I'll start with this one. This is kind of recent. The one listener, Annie, asked, could you please ask your guests about the court finding the Queen and the Pope guilty of child trafficking?
Well, Kevin and Nat, I'm a little concerned about his veracity. However, on the face of what he's doing, he's absolutely correct. The Queen Elizabeth is a Dame of Malta. She's a Bilderberger. I have no doubt that she's involved in human sacrifices. All these high nobles are involved in it. And I know a noble who told me, Eric, I've eaten human meat. Many of us nobles are cannibals. We eat it. So
it's called long pork,
I have no doubt. Pardon?
It's referred to, it's my understanding based on my research, which, by the way, is, I don't want to go there. It's called long pork in some circles. Yeah.
Well, I understand that human flesh tastes like pork.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was a recording that was given to me today by one of our listeners. We tried to play it earlier on an earlier show, and I was being texted chatted that it was not coming through, so we tried to replay it. Hopefully it came through this time all the way through. We'll check it. But ladies and gentlemen, this gentleman is exposing and has exposed what we have talked about on the Trading with the Enemy Act. He has exposed the fact that there's no honor at all with these people. And this is part of what we need to think about, and it's what I brought up in the previous show at the beginning of this show, is that we, you, I, we're trying to come into these courts, we're trying to find a way of being honorable. The problem is when we walk through that front door in these courts, we already know that we're going to get railroaded. But some people think if we try to do it on the private side, try to slip through the back door, come through some side door, come through some magical door, if we try to come in at honor, then that would automatically cause them to be honorable with us. The problem of it is, what we're finding out, it doesn't matter what door you walk into, they're corrupt. And one of the ways that I explained this in the previous show is I was talking on a veteran side of this thing, military side of being a POW. We have been taken over. There's no doubt. We don't have a government for the people, by the people, with the people. It's been taken over, and we are being held hostage. We are POWs. We are enemies of the state. Saying that, trying to get some people to understand the simplicity of this, it's a real hard concept because we really, truly want to believe that there is some honor through some door, some window, some crack, some crevices through the backside, that we could find some honor and be able to keep things in honor. What we're hearing off this gentleman here, he's got in a lot deeper than I have, but we're heading that way. What he is exposing, ladies and gentlemen, is frightening. This is what we are faced with. But what is more frightening is that we as Americans, we as the people out here, are not grasping the issue of how severe this is on our side of the fence. It's like being a POW in a prisoner of war camp. You're in a foreign country, even though you get a jailhouse full of Americans, and the American government sent us over there. Bottom line is, we're in foreign territory. And you can scream and holler that you want a trial by jury of your peers. If I'm going to be tried, I want a jury of my peers. Ain't going to happen. A lot of you are trying to do the separation side of this thing. The problem of it is, you're still dealing with the same corporation that you're trying to separate, and you're trying to get permission from them to separate. And you're wanting to put paperwork in that shows that you're not part of them, but you're still in the system. You're still going to the very same people that has taken over, that has sworn oath and allegiance to a foreign entity under fraternity of some type. And being like a POW, you can scream and you can holler and you can sit down and say, I want to be separated. And you can put in all this stuff to separate yourself and create your own trust and to give everything back. But the reality of it is in a prisoner of war camp, they may take you out of general population. They're going to give you what you want. They're going to separate you, and they're going to make you separate. They're going to accommodate you. They could put you in pig slop, tie you in there. They could put you in a hot box. You got what you wanted. You wanted separation. The problem of it is you're still in the prisoner of war camp. You're just in a different section of it. You didn't leave. Didn't get out. They just switched you over. And that's what we're sitting here saying when you're screaming and hollering that you want to be sovereign, you want the separation, you want to give everything back. Ladies and gentlemen, you can hand everything back. It doesn't change the fact that you're still under the corporation. It doesn't change the fact that you're still in this country. It doesn't change the fact that you're still listed as an enemy of the state. It does not change the fact. And this is what some of you are failing to comprehend. And it's reasonable because you want to think that there's fairness and there's honor and there's integrity. But what we played on this audio, there is no honor, there's no integrity, there's nothing other than total destruction on their side. And a lot of this comes into the biblical side of what is coming in Revelation. Ladies and gentlemen, it's got to take you, the people, to stand up, to change the system. It's going to take you, the people, to sit down because these congressmen, these judges, these public officials live out here among us. They don't live in a fourth dimension. This is not Star Trek where they beam in and beam out. They do live out here among us. They do have homes out here among us. They do retire out here among us. They do have to deal with us. And it's funny that the word us happens to be the same letters as United States. They have to deal with us. It's going to take us to have our voices heard and to force these congressmen into repealing that Trading with the Enemy Act. It's going to take us to push this issue. You could try to get out of the system, and I'm going to talk to Harvey, that gentleman that did that 14th Amendment Red Book. From my understanding, I'm going to get Harvey to confirm it. He got out of the system. He got exactly what he wanted. He can't buy nothing. He can't own anything. From what my understanding is, he has to live with a family member to take care of him because when he got out of the system, he got out. He has to have someone else to do for him. And ladies and gentlemen, that ain't what you're asking for. If you really understood the Trading with the Enemy Act, you go back and understand that these people are supposed to discharge our debt. That's so. They're supposed to discharge. They own, they're supposed to discharge. Title 31, 3714 shows that whoever you have, the lawyer is the fiduciary trustee who is required to discharge. Under the Trading with the Enemy Act, we have what is known as an alien property custodian. That's that attorney that gets assigned to you. He is required to discharge. He's required to sit down to handle this. When this thing was created in 1917, it was to allow us to be able to trade at that time. These corporations, these people at that time, was to give them permission. Was a license privilege at that time? Yes, it was. Anything that they did was a privilege because they got a license. The problem is the corporation turned this around on us. It's a privilege to drive. It's a privilege to own a vehicle. It's a privilege to own a house. That isn't how it was originally supposed to be intended. But there's the clue that this came under the Trading with the Enemy Act, and we've missed this until now. But those who have tried to get out, and I'm going to bring you up about Waco. These people tried to get out. And they met a fiery end with the military coming in and blowing the snot out of them. Some of you people out here trying to get out and relinquish your license, relinquish your Social Security number, relinquish your birth certificate, relinquish your whole livelihood. You have passed yourself and put yourself in as expatriation. You have really put yourself on a shit list, to put it bluntly. You may not think so, but you have. Because you have walked out of everything, and they can, at any given time, they could take you and there's no trace of you. Because you have relinquished, you have resolved everything, and you didn't give this any consideration, you haven't given this any thought. Once you take your name out of the system, they can do whatever they want. Because you're no longer there. I heard on a news broadcast this morning that 2% of the world population has disappeared. 2%. That's a huge number, 2%. Has literally disappeared. They talked about it on the news here this morning. They don't know where they went. Ladies and gentlemen, be careful what you ask for. Just like I said here in the first part of the program, previous program, the paperwork that I do, ladies and gentlemen, my paperwork exposes their corruption. I'm not trying to come in with honor. I'm not trying to come in with the flower child of the peace and the Mercedes symbols and the flowers and the long hair and the flowered checkered shirt of being a hippie, peace, love brother, you know. My paperwork exposes their corruption. A lot of you are trying to come in honor, and that's understandable. You're trying to come in under maritime, you're trying to come in under admiralty. The problem of it is, none of this falls under the Trading with the Enemy Act. But Rod falls under the Constitution, Article 3, Section 2. So does the Constitution, so does the federal statutes, and so does the word controversy. If they're not going to follow the Constitution and statutes and the controversial side, what makes you think that they're going to follow contractual law? As an enemy of the state, they have no obligation. The Geneva Convention was put into place, and did Germany follow the Geneva Convention? No. Did Vietnam? No. Are the people over in Iraq and Afghanistan when they captured our people? No. Why? Because we're enemies of their state. They don't have to follow the rules. They're supposed to, but they don't. And now you expect these people to sit in our office, to sit down and follow the rules? You expect them to be honorable? You expect them to sit down and discharge and do the right thing? Until we wake up until we start enforcing things on our own. If we can get international help, then this is fine. But ladies and gentlemen, it ultimately falls back onto you. Not me, you. You are the first line of defense, not me. You are the first line of defense. Problem of it is, I'm there beside you as you, because that you also applies to me. But you is being used as everybody. We are the ultimate first line of defense. Our voices have to be heard. Our demands have to be heard. The choice is yours of how they are heard. That choice is yours. But ladies and gentlemen, we have a very serious issue that has to be dealt with. A lot of it is biblical. A lot of it, from what it sounds like, you better get your heart right with the Maker, because you're going to meet Him. But I also believe on the story of Lot, that if the people will stand up, things could change. We're living in a time period that is very crucial for our civilization. Of what's right, what's wrong, who's honorable, who's not. Ultimately, these people are going to have to answer to the Maker, but so are we. Our choices that we make will determine our future. And also determine how we are judged when it comes to judgment time. We're in this time period. The choice is yours. We're going to have a call here tonight. I'm going to try to get tied into Google Hangout and BBS. I'm trying to get hooked into them. We'll sit down and see what happens. And we'll talk to you later. Thank you.